welcome to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This is episode 227. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
Mike, we have no news to report this week.
And that's a good thing.
No deaths, no special thanks.
Yeah.
So it's going to be time to just jump into the music right from the beginning in this episode.
Let's do that. Let's just skip with the banter and just go right into it. What do you got? You got to do all your kind of...
Just the spiel.
Spiel right. There. Do your spiel.
We're going to go through 6 albums as usual, and in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the recordings we're going to discuss in this episode. Also, at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. You can get all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. Now, if you can't see the full description or the recording list and links are hard to see or follow wherever you're listening to us now, you can always come over and check us out on our host site. That's Podbean, PODBEAN.com, where everything is easy to follow. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you like listening to us. Tell a music-loving friend as well. Help us grow our audience. And if you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, it helps us get listed in the music category recommendations on the podcast services, and that's another way new people can find out about us. Also, come follow us on our Facebook page to get extra info and more new releases throughout the week. You can leave a message or comment there as well. Check us out on X. We're Adult Music Pod over there. You can find links to the new episodes there. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We're going to play music samples as part of our discussion, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. And we're going to get things underway with some loot this week.
Yeah, I really dug this. Oh, we're getting right into it, aren't we? Wow. Okay, our first recording, classical. This is from the Baroque era, the very early Baroque, really my favorite period of the Baroque, when the Italians were figuring out what Baroque music was going to be. Of course, they didn't call it that. Does everybody know this story, by the way? Baroque music is an insulting term that was leveled at the music. Oh, that music is really Baroque. And Baroque literally means a misshapen pearl. So it was kind of like the music was misshapen. Oh, that horrible Baroque music. We got to go back to that Renaissance beautiful polyphony, right? But it took, and they just kept calling it that. Anyway, so our Baroque album, early Baroque, Libro, primo, and the artist here is Rolf Lislevand, and he's playing 2 instruments here, the arch lute and the chitarrone, which is another word for a theorbo. This is on the ECM New Series label, a label I really like. They've got their own sort of identity.
Yeah.
And this was released on August 29th, so it's pretty recent. Okay, the title, Libro Primo, refers to a musician's first volume of works. First publications often hold the most inspired and radical creations of an artist. Yeah, of course. Once you find your audience, you start trying to please them, and your music isn't as interesting anymore, I guess. I don't know. Depends on the era. At the beginning of the 17th century, a revolutionary new way of thinking, playing, singing, and writing music arose in northern Italy, spearheaded by the so-called Camerata Fiorentina. The music of Johann Hieronymus Kapsberger, Bernardo Giannoncelli, and Alessandro Piccinini belongs to this particular period of music history, and we'll hear compositions by them on this recording. When playing this music on the arch lute, which has a longer neck than a traditional lute, with open bass strings, but the same tuning as the old lute, Lislevand found the fact that the tuning of the larger instrument matched that of the older one suspicious. The tuning didn't seem to respond to the Nuove Musiche style heard on this album. Also, the chitarrone, or the theorbo, the Baroque guitar, and the Baroque lute had all been transformed through inventive new tunings, while the arch lute remained tied to the dogma of the past century. Just like the guitar today, Baroque lute players would often change up their instrument's tuning in search of new sounds and ideas. Lislevand decided to make the same use of octaves as the Baroque guitar and chitarrone for the arch lute on this album, by placing the octave strings on the upper position of even the fourth and possibly the third courses, I don't know what that means, but if you're a lute player, I guess you'd know. It makes the timbre more adventurous, and yeah, I could hear that. This is a great sounding album.
I think it makes something a little bit unique on this album, yeah.
Yeah, this is a unique sounding lute playing, and we're going to hear a lot of arch lute right at the beginning. The first track, Johann Hieronymus Kapsberger, Toccata Terza from Libro Primo di Tavolatura di Lauto. All these pretty ordinary names they were given. Published in Rome in 1611. On this track, we hear the arch lute right away, and I'd guess for most of the first half of the program. Now, the booklet doesn't indicate which instrument is played on which track, but it's often easy to guess, if not by the title of the work, because it'll usually indicate whether it's for, like, say, an arch lute or a chitarrone, then by the sound of the instrument. The instrument here has a bright, roomy sound with a lot of depth given to it by the room acoustics. The opening melody is gorgeous and florid. This is how the album begins. Let's hear this. He keeps avoiding that cadence. Don't you just love it? I mean, it's adventurous right away. The material has an inquisitive feel to it. It's pretty tricky and clever, too, as far as those harmonies go. I'm really enjoying the bloom on the sound, and this particular piece seems to have an A-B form, the second section starting just after the 1 minute mark. It's sensitively played, and has a gorgeous ending, too. Track 2, Giovanni Paolo Foscarini, Tasteggiata, from Li Cinque Libri della Chitarra alla Spagnola, published in 1640, much later than Kapsberger's publication. This track starts more quietly and mysteriously, with a muted sense to the attack. Let's hear this. We heard that cadence like 20 seconds in, and then I let it go on. A lot of space in that particular piece. Yeah. Lislevand is a seasoned pro when it comes to shaping melodies, leaving tense, pregnant pauses between phrases, and sometimes in the middle of them. The music breathes as beautifully in the acoustic as it does in the playing. This piece also seems to be A-B form, the more spacious second part beginning at around the 1 minute and 45 second mark. Great ending on a new harmony, too. A little surprise at the end. Track 3, Johann Hieronymus Kapsberger's Toccata Sesta, from his Libro Primo again. This opens with a tremolo effect quietly and effectively played, with great control by Lislevand here. Lislevand, in fact, is the author of this intro. This is not Kapsberger's work. He sort of added this himself. It's pretty cool, especially on an instrument like the arch lute, where you don't usually hear this sort of playing. It's kind of more like a guitar style of playing. Listen to this. right, so that slower music you heard at the end is Kapsberger's composition. The opening was Lislevand's improvised introduction, I guess.
Right.
Kapsberger's work here is a poignant, spacious melody that comes in at the 40-second mark. There are some spicy passing harmonies at times in his piece, but the arch flute is such a soft-sounding instrument that they don't jar the ear much. Just listen into that. They're really nice. Track 4, Bernardo Giannoncelli, Corrente con le sue spezzate, from Il liuto di Bernardo Giannoncelli. Man, I can't speak Italian anymore. Detto il Bernardello, published in Venezia in 1650. This track begins without a pause after the previous track. The opening is so attractive that I'd like to sample that. Perhaps modern guitarists would want to play this, because it kind of does sound like it would be great on the modern guitar too. Great tone on this, and that weird buzzing bass too at the low end. I really enjoyed that sound. And I found the rhythmic element on this piece to be especially appealing and modern sounding. The riches you find when you dig into the past, huh? Track 5, back to Kapsberger, Toccata Quinta. This starts out with an introductory pattern searching for a key. It is in fact a searching piece with some really beautiful harmonic discoveries. Let's hear a bit of this. I'm going to get this when it's finally moving through these harmonies at around the 2-minute mark. Lots of cool stuff in that. It just goes by, almost like a haiku poem. Really nice. Track 6 is by our lutist, or loudnist, I don't know how we would say this, Rolf Lislevand's Passacaglia al modo mio, in my style. Lislevand says he incorporated memories of themes, melodies, and harmonies he'd been unable to forget over the years by Barbara Strozzi, Johann Sebastian Bach, Beethoven, and Keith Jarrett. That's quite a range of styles there. All are alluded to during this work. The piece itself is pretty long compared to the rest of the album, clocking it at 7 minutes and 24 seconds. The opening is pretty straightforwardly Baroque sounding, and the Passacaglia repeating bass pattern sets it in motion. The music speeds up to double its speed at around the 1 minute and 30 second mark, and then we start getting varied patterns over the bass line. Lislevand stretches the type of melody we generally hear on this instrument, and he gets a more padded tone out of the instrument as a result. In fact, he gets quite a few different tones and textures in this inventive work. Here's a pretty modern-sounding variation that may very well be the Jarrett inspiration. Let's hear it. He's got that Three Blind Mice bass line going there. This sort of fades out, and we're back to a more Baroque-sounding variation after that sample, this time sounding pretty Bach-like. There's another more modern-sounding variation at 5 minutes and 50 seconds going to the end. This is a highly inventive work that I'd encourage you to hear in full. It's really the highlight of the album. Track 7, Johann Hieronymus Kapsberger, Toccata Seconda. Now we're hearing the chitarrone on this track, so track 6, Lislevand's solo composition, kind of divides the program between the archlute and the chitarrone, which we're going to hear for the next few tracks. I'm pretty sure this is the first time we're hearing this instrument on the album. It's got a deeper sound and the bass rings out strongly. It's got some technical sections demonstrating the touch technique that a toccata calls for, and a more exploratory section with pregnant pauses and changing dynamics. I'm going to start this in a little bit at around the 1 minute and 30 second mark. A lot of double stopping in that, lots of harmony. I rather like the change of melody and rhythm we hear in the sample. Another change comes at 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The end of the work features the melody and harmony, requiring some technique to pull it off. The work just ends on an odd harmony, seemingly mid-phrase. Track 8, Diego Ortiz, Ricercata Sesta, from Tratado de Glosas, published in Rome in 1553. Now, this is before the Baroque era started. This is on the theorbo, and the opening is a rhythmically played chord, played in the low end, that vibrates well in the ear. A melody appears before the 30-second mark, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to get as much of that in as possible. Man, to play such an intricately decorated melody while keeping that bass line going is very impressive, I have to say. Track 9, back to Kapsberger. This work is simply called Kapsberger. He named it after himself. This is from Libro Quarto. And this is for the chitarrone, not for the archlute. It has a pleasantly florid opening, showing off the bloom on the instrument's tone, well captured on the recording. Kapsberger has given his namesake piece a kind of folk-like quality. The theme repeats in different variations throughout the work. It's full-sounding, with an active bass line padding the low end throughout. The melody at the end has an interesting modal quality to it. Track 10, Kapsberger again, Toccata Seconda Arpeggiata, and this is for his Libro primo di tavolatura di chitarrone, not for the archlute. Published in Venice in 1604. Quick arpeggiated patterns open this work, and again, arpeggios aren't really something you'd hear in a work for the theorbo, I think. Listen to this. Let's get out of that right there. Again, Lislevand impresses with his clarity within his technique here, and the expressive quality he brings to this technical-sounding piece. Here the same configuration continues for the entire 3+ minutes of the piece. Track 11, Johann Hieronymus Kapsberger's Toccata Prima from the same... Actually, this is back to the arch lute again, so we're back to the lighter-sounding instrument here. There's a lot of room sound on this, maybe too much, but it's evocative. It sounds studio-produced, making the instrument sound bigger than it is, and I'm wondering if that's an effect of hearing the arch lute played after a track for the chitarrone. A deep halo surrounds each note. The detail is still there, but I feel like this should have been given a more natural room sound by the producer, who of course is Manfred Eicher. He produces like every ECM recording, both classical and jazz. Along with Lislevand himself, he's also a producer. Eicher does tend to like an atmospheric sound, I have to say. This kind of stands out, though. I think maybe it's just its position on the album, but let's hear it. And the piece goes on from there. Actually, there's quite a bit of it left. Track 12, Kapsberger's Gagliarda Prima. I like a good Galliard. This is a pretty track for the arch lute, without as much reverb as the previous track, but still a generous helping. The instrument sounds as powerful as the chitarrone here, and the work has some appealing, gentle playing. You know, when people ask you, like, what era of the past would you like to live in, I really can't answer the question because the entire past just seems like one nonstop horror to me. But I think if there was a place where the Galliard was played and danced, I think I could survive there. That'd be okay. I'd be happy enough. Anyway, track 13, Johann Hieronymus Kapsberger and Alessandro Piccinini. I don't think they did this together, but they both sort of did their own variations on the Folias. This is from Libro Primo di Intavolatura di Chitarrone by Kapsberger and from Intavolatura di Liuto e di Chitarrone by Piccinini. The first was published in 1604 and Piccinini's was published in 1623. So the slow-moving, mysterious Folia chord sequence is heard at the opening. This is sort of like a chord pattern that was usually improvised over. And it had a specific character, too. Let's hear it. Now, because it's the same set of harmonies, every composer who composed to this, you could actually put all of their works together and string them together, and there'd probably be some kind of continuity to them, and that's what's happening here. These variations are all sensitively played and sound inventive. I'm wondering if this is a combination of the two composers' approaches to the harmonic template that make up the Folia, and I like the way the variations end with an aggressive theme. That's got to be by Piccinini. Track 14, Diego Ortiz, Recercada Quinta, from Tratado de Glosas, Rome, 1553. So this is an early work, pre-Baroque. It's got a very slow, hypnotic pattern at the beginning, and we hear the melody at about the 22nd point. I'm going to play this from the beginning, and we'll stop it when we hear a good stopping place. Here we go. The theme gets quicker and more complicated suddenly, and then we hear brief sections of fancy fingerwork in this evocative closing piece that'll happen later in the track. At this point, the reverb seems to be at a normal level. The final variation has a deeply incised rhythmic quality, and when the line ends, so does the work and the album. So Rolf Lislevand always manages to put together compelling programs of music from the Baroque era, and his compelling style of playing, and here tuning on the archlute, brightens the music and makes the listener wonder why he's not already familiar with this music. Lislevand is recorded very close on the album, and some room acoustic is audible, making the tone breathe. Lislevand makes even the busiest passages sound with absolute clarity, which the close recording admirably picks up. He manages an intimate tone on both instruments that he plays, though the chitarrone has the bigger sound. I thought the transition back to the archlute at track 11 drew a bit more ambient sound out of the production than was necessary, but it doesn't hurt the performance at all. This really is fantastic playing throughout. It's a fairly quiet album, and it's a creatively put together program of music from the earliest days of the Baroque era when the new music was emerging from Italy.
There's a lot of reverb or room sustain on the recording, and you get used to it kind of quickly because it adds to the charm here. The Kapsberger works are the center of attraction on this recording, right? And it's still hard to put a finger on his composition style because it contains a lot of variety, always with really interesting harmonic movement. So that's just catching my ear throughout. And among the lute, and I guess the orbo is the same as the chitarrone, right? Among the recordings I've heard of this instrument, this one stands out kind of uniquely in the movement of the lines that you can follow. And after reading the extensive liner notes, which is really an essay on the music and instrument, it's quite informative. I think it must have to do with the unique tunings that Lislevand has chosen here. It makes the instrument expressive in interesting ways. And his own original composition highlighted those possibilities even more. Not in the sample that you took so much, but in other parts, it has some real pop sentiments. And it brought it really into the modern days. So be sure to check that track out as well. And the whole recording is really kind of peaceful, wonderful sonics in a real spacey kind of way, gets you inside the instrument. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
I really love this. I bet it'd sound great early in the morning or really late at night. You know, it's a pretty quiet record. All right, second album in classical this week. 2 piano trios by Heinrich August Marschner. Heard of him? Me neither. He was German. He lived 1795 to 1861, and this is a Naxos release of his Piano Trios Volume 2. So there's a Volume 1 out there already that we missed. It came out last year. This is by the Gould Piano Trio, and they are Lucy Gould on the violin, Richard Lester on the cello, and Benjamin Frith on the piano. I always kind of found it odd that people would name a classical ensemble after themselves. Okay, this is my group. I'm going to call it the Mike Trio. Want to play in the Mike Trio? Yeah. Anyway, this came out on August 22nd. So Marschner was the leading German operatic composer in the era between Weber and Wagner. Now, we're familiar with Wagner's operas, probably, if we like classical music a lot, but maybe not so much Weber's. A lot of people have never heard Der Freischütz, his most famous opera, even though, it's pretty popular and kind of an important work, too. Marschner kind of came between these two. I don't know any of his operas, I should say. But he also wrote prolifically for chamber forces. His chamber works, though he wrote many, have not received much attention, and you're going to wonder why after you hear this album. He apparently composed piano trios throughout his career. There are 7 of them, and he titled each of them Grand Trio. Diary records reveal that he had a close relationship with Robert and Clara Schumann, those consummate tastemakers of the day. They liked Marschner's Lieder and his piano trios as well. And the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung refers to Marschner and his chamber works as having, quote, an uncommon talent for discovering melodies that are always interesting and never ordinary. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
He composed his first piano trio, Opus 29, in 1823, so that was pretty early in his career, and did not return to the genre until the 1840s. And then he composed a bunch of them. There are a total of 7 piano trios, so we'll have at least one more volume of them in the future Naxos releases. There was already one release that had 2 piano trios on it. This one has 2, and there are 3 still left to go. I imagine there'll be 1 or 2 more releases after this. And now I'm going to be curious to hear it. Okay, so I'm talking about, it's so great. Let's start listening. Piano trio number 2 in G minor, Opus 111. What were the 110 works he composed before this? They're probably mostly operas, and in fact, I think a lot of them were Lieder. He did a lot of songs. Okay, so this is a dark, tension-filled work. It starts allegro con spirito, which doesn't seem like a dark kind of indication, but the movement remains agitated almost entirely throughout. The opening piano line is haunting, and the strings repeat it with a slithering tone. I like those slithering strings. The second theme has a more lyrical quality. You can hear it in 1 minute and 20 seconds. Lyrical is always good. It means it's like a song, There's a lot more space in that lyrical theme, and the entire exposition has a kind of coiled restraint to it, thanks in part to the well-considered performance by the Gould trio here. They actually play the entire exposition with a tense restraint. There are places where they can burst out dynamically, but I think this is an interpretation that better suits this large structure, this more musical, more measured sort of approach. When I say musical, what I mean is they're sort of playing it more for the shape of the melodies and the overall form than they are for any like dramatic moments. Okay, so music I oppose to drama when I say that. But the tension is always there. Let's hear the opening so that we can hear what this composer's melodies sound like. Yeah, catchy, inventive, nice orchestration too, nice trading of the lines. That exposition repeats, and the development section, more menacing still, starts at around the 5-minute mark. There are some appealing textures here, such as the rising staccato piano line over quick bowed repeating chords in the strings. The melody then gets handed back and forth between the 3, and Marschner does this a lot, and he does it really well. The interplay between the 3 instruments in the trio sounds really great.
That,
yeah. The recording is clean, and the piano comes across with full tone, yet the strings are up front and are also heard in great detail. I like the twinkling music box quality the piano gets in its high end at around the 6-minute and 20-second mark, and I thought I'd sample that too. And then he goes off with the main melody there by himself. The piano gets a lot of solo time in these works, I have to say. I guess Marschner himself was a pianist. The recapitulation seems to begin at the 7-minute mark, but it's played with hesitations, first in the piano and then in the strings. It's got an "are we there yet? Should we be doing this now?" sort of quality to it. That's captured well by the ensemble. They were kind of teasing with it. And this rather cleverly leads to a more confident statement of the first theme, the real start of the recapitulation after that. So a little bit of teasing the listener there. We finally get the second theme in the tonic key at 8 minutes and 55 seconds after spending a long time with that first theme melody. It's an interesting approach to sonata writing and with appealing melodies all the way through. And that's just going to continue in the second movement, the Romance, marked Andantino. The melody here brims with optimism in contrast to the first movement. The opening theme here is immediately attractive and rather playful. Let's hear this. Beautiful expressive tone there by Lucy Gould on the violin, by the way, and also Richard Lester on the cello. She's got like this teasing sort of way with the melody. I really liked it. Lucy Gould on violin has a lead for a good deal of the music heard just after the first minute. At 2 minutes and 4 seconds, the cello takes over with a new melody, the piano accompanying with quick downward moving harmonies. The B section of this ABA movement is played entirely with the cello in the lead. The violin has actually dropped out at this point, so it's kind of a cello and piano work for the middle section. So a true trio, because that middle movement is supposed to be like more lightly orchestrated than the A sections, traditionally anyway. It's a clever nod to the classical era practice of thinning the texture for the middle section. The piano is pretty busy in accompaniment in this section as well. At the 5 minute and 17 second mark, the B section comes to a full cadence with a pause, and then we're back to a reorchestrated opening theme, featuring the piano playing in its high end, and the re-entry of the violin, and the movement plays out from there. Track 3, third movement, Scherzo, humoresque, marked Presto. This is playful with sharp forzandos and surging crescendos adding to the drama. Aggressive chords on the piano draw in the violin and cello. The opening is dominated by the piano. The theme that follows is a dotted melody within a dotted rhythm, sort of like a horse slightly galloping. The dotted rhythm really gets beaten to death in the B section of this scherzo. It's appealing and playful, though. It kind of reminds me of Schumann. There's a swashbuckling quality to the opening scherzo theme when it returns, and there are some clever reorchestrations, including a brief pizzicato line at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which I'd like to sample. So a rather gentle section there. Tension builds up via dynamics and a squeezing of the tempo. Then the piece suddenly gets quiet and the movement comes to a quiet, subdued ending. Track 4 is the final movement, Allegro Vivace. The opening theme is related to the lively second subject of the previous movement, though the minor tonality dominates here. The rhythm, though not dotted here, is at the same tempo and repeats the same chord under the melody, mostly played by the piano at the opening, with the strings making brief statements. The piano states a theme solo at the minute mark, and the strings comment only. At the 1 minute and 25 second mark, the violin finally gets a melody to itself. At 2 minutes and 27 seconds after some establishing of a cadence, the opening theme returns in the violin with the piano's repeated chords. I've got to say, 3 minutes into the work, the cello hasn't had much to do, except provide harmonic underpinning. The piano has been the star of the movement. Benjamin Frith's playing here is admirably clear, and he builds tension well with his tempo and dynamics. And I have to say, he's really impressive as an accompanist. He has a lot of really busy work that could easily overpower the other two musicians, and yet he keeps his volume discreetly in the background. The more rolling sections also never lose sight of their harmonic goal in the performance. At 4 minutes and 51 seconds, the violin plays the theme, whose return gives the movement a rondo quality, but I'm going to guess this is more of a sonata rondo, given that all of the material we hear is stated at the beginning, with the piano showing some virtuosity in its traveling scales and arpeggios. Let's sample a little bit of this from really late in the movement, around the 8-minute mark, or a little into the 8-minute mark. Oh, what key are we going into there? Boy, I heard that little shift. All right, there's a big build-up to the final cadence, which arrives with a satisfyingly large sense of finality. Tracks 5 through 8, Piano Trio number 6 in C minor, Opus 148. Man, that's a large number. This was published in 1850. So this is pretty late in Marschner's career. Track 5 is the first movement, Allegro risoluto ed appassionato. Opens with fiery intensity driven by urgent offbeat piano accents. It's got a kind of leaping feel to it. The second theme is flowing and lyrical, a total contrast, and the second theme starts at the 1 minute mark, but I'm going to sample the opening of the movement. This is the first theme. As we head towards the second theme there, building up to that via the bridge material. The Gould trio gives the first theme ample intensity, but keeps it musical again, with the overall line in mind, while the second theme is given a tonal glow. All is well judged as far as tempo goes. The exposition repeats at 2 minutes and 35 seconds. The development starts at 5 minutes and 14 seconds with ghostly wisps of the theme, played with a hush, which continues into the following thematic fragments. It's nice to hear the cello get the thematic material at around 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Marschner generally doesn't give it too much to do in melodic sections, leaving a lot to the piano. At the 7 minute and 2 second mark, the recapitulation is bounded into. This time the second theme is played with a hush to it and without much of a bridge leading into it. All of the material is highly appealing, with attractive melodies. The cadence material features a brief statement of the second theme before rocketing to the cadence. Track 6, the second movement, Andante sostenuto, begins with cadenza-like piano chords. It's a pretty bold statement with which to start a slow movement, really. The piano mellows a bit as it goes, and as the cello and violin underline the harmony, the piano goes into an appealing theme, which I'll sample. This is at around the 1 minute and 10 second mark of the recording. and the piano goes back into that theme. The piano really drives the movement, though the violin gets to introduce a new theme at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The violin and cello seem to temper the piano's mood when they come in. The cello gets a solo theme at the 3-minute mark, and it's yet another attractive one. It goes on for a minute until the violin starts agitating and breaks it up, leading eventually to an even quieter theme at 4 minutes and 50 seconds, led by the violin and embellished by the piano. The piano always emboldens the theme when it comes in, and that is the case from the 5-minute and 30-second mark into the 6th minute. A cadence isn't reached, just another variation of the theme, more quiet this time, with piano accompanying with quick arpeggio figures. The movement, so scarce in cadences, doesn't even have a final one. The ending acts as a lead-in to the next movement, and the scherzo, this third movement, features a fleet-fingered theme for the piano, very attractively entered into from the previous movement. I want to show you how that happens, so I'm going to play from the second into the third movement. Now, if you listen into that theme, there's a lot of really interesting detail in the piano part. The Gould give this an impressive sense of flow and energy. The piano is pretty busy throughout the A section. The B section starts at around the 3-minute and 4-second mark, also with the solo piano. It's got a folk dance feel to it, which the cello comes in to embellish, and eventually the violin as well. The piano leads throughout and also reintroduces the A section solo. The violin and cello offer some contrasting melody. The piano brings the movement to a quiet end. Track 8 is the fourth movement finale, marked Allegro. This has a generally jovial spirit, punctuated by sudden bursts of agitation. Marschner keeps pulling appealing melodies out of his hat, and this movement starts with yet another one. Let's hear this opening and very appealing melody. It's really high spirits all around, and the Gould trio get right into the spirit of the movement. You get a sense of their enjoyment of the music's overall flow and good feeling. Once again, the pianist Benjamin Frith has got some serious work to do in playing the intricate lines he's given, and his balance is immaculate. Playing such intricate material quietly, balancing with the violin and cello, is no mean feat. We're hearing an excellent set of performances on this album, excellent flow throughout, leading to a satisfying conclusion to the work and the album. So, these are two piano trios that will make you wonder why you've never heard them before. Both are big works and are full of appealing melodies and clever orchestration. Formally, they're pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of original detail in them. The Gould trio are exceptionally musical in these two works, and what I mean by that is they keep an overall sense of flow and continuing line to each of the movements, rather than breaking up the flow for dramatic effects. And the approach pays off beautifully, not least because Marschner provides such appealing melodies throughout each movement. The recording is exceptionally clear and present-sounding, with each instrument making its mark, though Marschner heavily favors the piano in these works. The balance achieved on the recording and by the ensemble both is fantastic, really well balanced. This music is quite a discovery and couldn't be better performed or better recorded for that matter. There's an attractive photo of Hanover Town Hall on the cover of the album, too. There's already a previous volume featuring piano trios 1 and 7, which was released last year, and I'm sorry I missed that one after hearing this one. In case this isn't enough for you, you can check that one out too, and I certainly wouldn't blame you for doing so. All the music here is immediately appealing.
The program notes say that Marschner was friends with the Schumanns, and
Right.
if I had heard this music in the background without knowing the composer, I may have guessed Schumann. It fits that romantic period piano trio style perfectly, although on closer listening you realize the piano role is quite important here. The harmony doesn't have many surprises to it, but the melodic ideas are creative, pleasing, and plentiful. The arranging and the development are skillful, and exchanging of lines between instruments and the variety of techniques with pizzicato strings and trickling piano lines is all quite charming. I enjoyed the Gould piano trio's performance here, lots of sensitivity to dynamics and enthusiasm without being overly indulgent in the romantic themes. It was a real perfect balance and a fine-sounding recording.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and hear volume 1 of this and now follow this series like we're following the Wranitzky.
Yeah.
This one at least will be shorter,
Another new composer to discover, yeah.
Yeah, I'd really enjoy hearing these on my own, while doing my work at home or whatever. Anyway, the third album for tonight is not a contemporary composer, but a 20th century composer. The Spirit of Love, chamber music by Ailsa Dixon. That's Ailsa, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. She lived 1932 to 2017. This is a performance by the Villiers Quartet with Lucy Cox, soprano, and Charlie Draper on the Ondes Martineau. We hear the Ondes Martineau, this electronic instrument. Sounds a lot like a theremin, and we think of Messiaen's Turangalila Symphony, the only work that we ever hear it in. And here we have one more appearance by it, so that's pretty great. This is on the Resonus Classics label, released on August 22nd. All right, we start out with 3 songs by Ailsa Dixon. The Spirit of Love, 3 songs for soprano and string quartet, and Lucy Cox is the soprano. Now, these were written individually and put into a group later. They were found among the works in Dixon's musical archive after she died. There's a lot of this going around. Florence Price's works were found in an attic, too, and this sort of happened to Ailsa Dixon as well. Track 1, first movement, as the harmonic to the sounding string. Beautiful title, and the words are by the composer, so it's her poem. Very pretty orchestration here. The strings, though, sound far away from the voice, which is up front. Lucy Cox is an appealing soprano, and the text is easy to understand thanks to her clarity and the writing of the composer. Let's get a sample. I really wanted to get that really clean high note in there. It just rings like a bell. It's fantastic. This is an appealing song without any of the odd angular quirks of so much 20th century music. It's very melodic, and I like Lucy Cox's appealing tone in the vocalises too. She gets over those high notes comfortably without jarring the listener. Track 2, From Afar, from Eve and Morning. This is an A.E. Housman poem, and I think Ralph Vaughan Williams set this one as well. The writing for the strings is appealing here, and I want to isolate that a little bit. This track finds Cox in her high range for the most part. This particular song is coming across as very English to my sensibility. The phrasing of the vocal lines is a bit odder here compared to the first song. Track 3, the third song, The Night Has 1,000 Eyes. A warm but thin-sounding intro from the string quartet. The bass end isn't caught with much depth, but it's all of a piece, and really the soprano is the star here. I like the writing for the vocal, which Lucy Cox seems to relish singing. She's got a lot of sustained notes here, so we can enjoy her appealing tone. I sort of hate to go out on that high note, but it's sounding really great. There's a really pretty resolution after the first verse, separating the piece, like the poem, into two sections. Very pretty vocalizing by Cox at the end of the track. Her final high note is uplifting. Track 4, Nocturnal Scherzo for String Quartet. This was premiered in 1986. The composition is an interpretation of a dream sequence involving the Commedia dell'arte character Pierrot being swept off stage by a macho man who he then mocks. They try on each other's themes, and the dream fades at the end. The track starts with some brooding chords sounding cloudy in the string quartet. At the 32-second mark would be the point where the narrative begins. There's a bouncing bass line and a rather crooked-sounding melody in the viola. The tempo seems rather slow here, the ensemble going for musicality more than drama. Let's hear a little bit into this, maybe at around the 1 minute and 15-second mark. There's more after that. The Villiers have a fine sense of the shape of the musical paragraphs, and that comes across well here. The playing sounds neat and sometimes borders on romantic. The dance rhythm has a music box quality to it, not quite mechanical, but inevitable in its flow. The piece settles down and comes to a calm conclusion. Track 5, The Lost Scherzo for String Quartet. This quartet movement was written at the university in Durham in the mid-1950s and disappeared for over half a century until the manuscript turned up in an attic after her death. It features frequent changes of time signature, perhaps inspired by Bartók. This youthful piece has a lot of appeal right from the start. It's got an appealing, slightly dancing rhythm. Again, the Villiers takes a slower tempo, allowing the music to flow clearly. Themes here are all appealing. I rather liked the scurrying individual strings at about the 2-minute mark, followed by a pizzicato and a theme in the cello. The writing is appealing throughout the work, with attractive melodies in each moment. Track 6, Sohrab and Rustum for String Quartet. This was composed 1987 to 1988. It's through composed means there's no kind of set form for it. It just narrates its story tonally. and it's inspired by Matthew Arnold's poem about the fatal encounter between an estranged father and son on opposite sides of a battle between the Tartar and Persian armies. Rustam is the father and Sohrab the son. Sohrab is killed by Rustam, and their identities are discovered. Despair, tenderness, and forgiveness follow. This is the longest single-movement work on the album. It starts atmospherically, with a high sustained violin note like an eerie signal from beyond, and the rest of the quartet playing an atmospheric chord. That eeriness continues in the cold double stops as the high violin makes its way downward. A youthful theme appears at 1 minute and 48 seconds, perhaps depicting Sohrab the son. This is a pretty straightforward narrative style. There are no exotic rhythms or scales depicting the Tartar and Persian armies. It's a work about the individuals involved. Dynamics in the 4th minute and sudden harsh chords heighten the drama. Again, there's nothing terribly impolite here, and the Villiers again take a slowish tempo and take a lot of care to shape their lines. There are a lot of appealing moments, and it's hard to know where to sample, as so much of the work differs. There's a lot of drifting harmony from the 6th to 8th minutes, and I guess I'm going to sample from around the 8th minute. Yeah, that last phrase came to a stop on that open 5th chord, and a really great effect. This section of the work is calm for a long period of time. It seems like the killing occurred early in the work, in the 4th minute, and the remaining 8 minutes are dedicated to the dialogue of reconciliation between father and son. The piece ends with a crescendo up to a kaleidoscopic set of circling lines, ending on a quiet chord, much as the work began. All right, the moment we've been waiting for, Shining Cold for soprano, and martineau, viola, and cello. Charlie Draper is the player of the and martineau. This is a vocalese that explores the different sonorities of the high soprano voice. There are no words. And it also explores the different sonorities of the strings and the and martineau itself. The inspiration for this work came from the understanding that ancient languages like Greek and Hebrew had one single word that could mean breath, wind, or spirit. The three intermingle in this piece. The soprano voice here generally sings in unison with the and martineau, but has more arabesques in her line. It's nice to hear the and martineau in a piece that's not Messiaen's Turin Galila. It kept rather calm in this work, acting as a ghostly echo of the vocal. Textures change in the string quartet as the work goes on. There are some attractive flutterings from the and martineau in the 2nd minute, and we get some bass from the instrument there too, so I'm going to have to go for that part so we can hear a little bit of what this instrument can do and what it sounds like, especially in its lower end. You know, the and martineau never really bursts out of the texture throughout the entire work. It just sort of acts as sort of like this comment or, shadow of the vocal line, I guess. The work rather continues as it was at the beginning, and after this moment it ends calmly. All right, tracks 8 through 26, the final work on the album. Variations on Love Divine for string quartet. So this is a set of variations. They all sound rather similar to each other. And they're under the theme of divine love from the story of Jesus, really. It really begins with the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and it ends with the Apocalypse, I guess. So we even go beyond the Gospel of John. The first variation, or the first section, in the beginning was the Word. Droning tones in the bass and some eerie high harmonies in the upper strings open the track. Okay, so a pretty calm beginning. Track 9, the angel Gabriel visits Mary. This is similar in tone to the opening track, but it has a descending melody. It's more emphatic when the music resumes after an initial pause. Those downward streaming tones keep coming, except for one brief solo for the cello. Track 10, the visitation of the Holy Spirit. Again, this has an eerie opening with a bit of a rocking rhythm to the theme. It's similar in tone to the previous two movements, but I rather liked the rhythm here, and I wanted to sample this too. Track 11. Mary and Joseph make their way to Bethlehem. We have a strong rhythm here. The feel is pretty ebullient and evokes the countryside. It's very brief. Track 12. The birth of Jesus, the Word made flesh. This has those high harmonies with a beautiful lullaby-like melody beneath. It's hard to sample as it's too short. Track 13. The River Jordan, where Jesus is baptized. Also brief, with a similar rhythm to track 10, which we already heard. These variations only differ slightly, but they all maintain interest. Track 14, the Spirit of God descending like a dove. The rhythm here is pushed by pizzicati in the cello. A steady streaming rhythm and melody follows. Let's hear this one. Track 15, Jesus calls to his disciples. This is made up of brief phrases with an authoritative yet soft-edged feel to them. Track 16, Jesus is healing and teaching, very brief, with a sweet melody in the violin as the cello moves in an arpeggiated pattern. Track 17, the Pharisees plotting. There's some drama here, so I think we should hear the opening. This really rather differs from the rest of the piece. The Pharisees are given some harsh and even hysterical tones. Track 18, Jesus and the disciples on the Mount of Olives, a brief, sweet movement giving Jesus' prayers a gentle interpretation. Track 19, the disciples see Jesus led away. The drama of the Passion begins here. It's gentle, the descending tones indicating the growing distance between Jesus and the disciples as he is led away. Track 20, the agony and the nails. I'm kind of laughing a bit because there's an effect here of the nails going into the hand with these three sort of pounding patterns in the strings. It's got emphatic wailing chords and those quick bowed 3-note patterns that indicate the hammering of the nails. Track 21, The Centurion, surely this was the Son of God. This also has a heavenly, uplifting feel to it. It's rather on the sweet side, and it's pretty short. Track 22, The Disciples' Fear and Anguish, Jesus appears to them. So we jump ahead to after Jesus' resurrection. Familiar themes repeat here. We hear the agony and the nails material at the opening as the disciples discuss the crucifixion, and we can hear what that sounds like in this sample, because it's the same as the nail part that I was talking about before. Let's hear that. So you heard the dun dun dun, that's the nails. Jesus' presence is indicated by the sudden gentle tone of the chords. Track 23, The Ascension. Rising tones in the violins paint the picture of Jesus rising into heaven. This is pretty brief. Track 24, The Disciples Preaching. So we actually hear knocking on the wood of the instruments in this movement, possibly to indicate the disciples knocking on doors to spread the gospel. The melody represents their preaching. Let's hear a little bit of this. Very cute. Track 25, The Great and Terrible Day of the Lord. This movement continues with the same tonality, although with drooping phrases moving downward. This variation is longer and has more variety in it. Let's hear how Dixon interprets this great and terrible day. Yeah, well, that's not so bad. Anyway, there's a sweet melody played up high on the first violin at the end, possibly on harmonic notes. And finally, track 26, The Song of Praise and the Dance of Joy. The cello starts this movement, which starts with song-like music, sounding a bit churchy, but not quite a chorale. The dance starts at around the 1-minute mark, and I'd like to sample that. So it's sort of a pastoral dance, kind of probably danced in the countryside, in nature. And that's the end of the piece and the album. So for those seeking out more tonal music from the 20th century, Ailsa Dixon's music will be a real find. All of Dixon's music on this album is highly melodic and meant to appeal to a general audience. So it's got a generosity of spirit in that way, and it's all solidly composed and has great integrity. The Villiers Quartet have put together an appealing program of her music and perform it with real focus and dedication. Tempos are rather cautious on the slow side, but the Villiers always manage to give the music a strong sense of flow, and the listeners can linger and absorb local detail as a result. We didn't get to hear much music like this from 20th century composers, yet it was there all along. It's an immediately enjoyable album with some attractive string quartet writing and appealing singing from Lucy Cox as well.
As a first impression of this composer, gentle comes to mind as an overall description of Dixon's
good word.
Writing for strings especially. It seems to be built into the phrasing and brought out in the performance here by the Villiers Quartet. The variations on Love Divine was introspective and interestingly reflective on the religious inspiration for the works. I found it kind of captivating. Lucy Cox's voice really soars like a bird on the spirit of love, and when combined with Charlie Draper's own Martineau, makes for an interesting combination on Shining Cold. As you say, this music is accessible, and I found it, as I mentioned, gentle, an interesting sort of stylistic integrity for a composer. I'd be interested in hearing more of this 20th century music. I wonder what her other works sound like and what themes they take up.
Yeah, the find for me here was Lucy Cox's vocals. I'd kind of like to hear more of her, if she has any other recordings out there. I'd kind of like to hear a little bit more of her singing and see what she does. I like the voice a lot.
It's a really strong and steady voice that rings out.
Yeah.
All right, over on the jazz side, in the last episode we had a young trumpet player, Jason Charles, making his first mark, and here we've got an outstanding pianist, Caelan Cardello.
God, I really love this album, actually.
With his Chapter 1 on Jazzbird Records, came out August 29th. Caelan Cardello was born in Teaneck, New Jersey. He started playing piano at the age of 5, soon pursuing both classical and jazz music. On the jazz side, he learned from great names like Fred Hirsch, Frank Kimbrough, and Dave Kikoski. And he graduated from William Patterson University with a bachelor's degree in jazz piano performance. He's currently getting his master's from Juilliard. Now around 25 years old, he's been playing around New York with big-name musicians in recent years. He had an association with bass great Rufus Reid, and they had a recording together. Rufus Reid presents Caelan Cardello in 2023. For this recording, Cardello was approached by Jeffrey Hulfer, head of Jazzbird Records, to make a recording deal with his trio. And the recording notes say, Cardello's writing and playing styles are heavily informed by great pianists of the past, with a noteworthy emphasis on melody drawn from legends such as Oscar Peterson and Cedar Walton. Cardello keeps each piece memorable and able to stick with its audiences. Melody, however, is not the only informed element of Cardello's writing. Cardello's harmonic structuring is mature and historically rich, drawing on iconic bebop formations from Thelonious Monk and modern stylings from Brad Mehldau. Cardello describes his own sound as swing, while trying to preserve swing with newer melodies, modern melodies, and thinking of different ways to present swing with my own touch. So keep that in mind as we go through and take a listen to this interesting recording. Caelan Cardello on piano, Jonathan Muir-Cotton on bass, Domo Branch on drums, and we've got some sax on a few tracks from Chris Lewis on tenor sax. The recording's going to get underway with a Cardello original, Gone Fishin', a tribute to both his father and Harold Mayburn's manner of composition. This is happy and infectious right away. Branch starts it out on the drums for 8 measures, then bass and piano are in for 2 more rounds, building up the intro groove. The melody has a kind of AAB macro and micro structure. The first small part has simple down-home, turkey in the straw kind of phrases that it repeats with embellishments, and the final phrase is more chordal with interesting voicings. That goes around twice into a final section with a cool syncopated bass and left-hand piano part with a lot of excitement from Branch's drums. Let's hear everything get started. After the melody, it comes down softly for the start of a solo from Cardello. It's all quite exciting and hard to decide where to give you a sample from, but let's jump back in right around the 3-minute mark. Stop it there. Funky, bluesy, and lots of melodic ideas. At the end of his solo, Muir Cotton gets the funky bass line going again, back into the final melody section. Track 2 is our standard on the recording, All of You, by Cole Porter, first recorded by Mel Torme back in 1954. It's a standard, as I mentioned, and the arrangement is inventive and fun, with a lot of bassline excitement and tight coordination between Cardello's left hand and Muir Cotton, with brush punctuation from Branch on the drums. Cardello's right hand shows off a lighter touch and snappy swing sense on top of all that with the melody. Very classy with a light touch there, and he works it up to some more rollicking fun through his solo. Muir Cotton has a bass solo with melodic direction and a lot of bounce in this one too. Track 3, another Cardello original, Steppin' Up. I'm not really sure what the structure is here, but it certainly does build anticipation and excitement. Dazzling two-handed piano lines lead to sections of more static harmony, and then moving chords stepping up to a big climax with furious drumming from Branch. Let's check this out. After an improvised solo from Cardello, there's some exciting trading with Branch, so let's hear some of that exchange later on. And it connects back to the beginning sections to make an ending from there. Track 4 is a tune by pianist Harold Mayburn, John Neely. This comes from his 1970 Greasy Kid Stuff recording that featured Lee Morgan and Hubert Laws. Chris Lewis is in on tenor sax for this one. After a 16-measure intro, the minor melody is a 32-measure AABA shape with piano and sax working in unison and little piano fills on the B section. And let's listen on to hear some more of Lewis's playing on this one. Cardello follows with a solo that generates a lot of percussive excitement, and the tune ends up with Once More Through the melody. Track 5, another Cardello original, Motherhood. This is quiet and sparse for the first 24 measures. A two-note bass figure marks things out as Cardello paints with light notes and chords. There's a harmonic shift and things build up to a bit of a groove. I'll take a sample from the second time through where Cardello adds more improvisations. It's quite sensitive. I'm not quite reaching the groove part with that sample, but overall I get more of a modern, kind of Brad Mehldau feeling from this one. Track 6, another Cardello original, Don't Look Back, a minor bluesy tune. Cardello starts it out and the melody phrases are spaced out, creating a lot of anticipation. There's a 20-measure main section, Luques joining in on the last phrase, and after a vamping 8-measure section, they go around again into a building final section. Let's check it out. And let's continue on listening to Cardello's improvisations on this one. Luques is up next for a solo, and when he's done, they take it around the melody into the final section to end it up. Track 7, a Cardello original, A Night in New York, a sparse melody idea of short phrases into walking bass. It seems to be 18 measures with a little hold before it repeats, shorter the next time, and then Cardello is off on improvisations. Starts out with a really light touch matching the mood, but works up to a chiming climax. So let's hear that climax of his solo. comes down softly for a final time through the melody from there. Track 8 is Groundwork, a tune by Cedar Walton. This is from his 1986 recording, The Trio 3, with David Williams and Billy Higgins. Cardello must really like this tune. It's more animated and energetic than Walton's own recording. Let's check it out. Cardello is off soloing. It's impressively speedy and exciting. On Walton's recording, this tune was a feature for Billy Higgins' drumming, and Branch gets the spotlight here, so let's check out some of his drumming on this tune. Final enthusiastic time through the melody finishes it out with more flourishes from Branch. The remaining tunes are all Cardello originals. Track 9, Solidarity. A drum roll brings it in, and Luques is back in on tenor sax for this one. This has a really long melody. It starts out loping and bluesy with sassy sax lines from Luques. After 16 measures, it changes up to a Latiny straight beat. Then a 4-measure transition brings it back to the original feel, and we hear the first 16 measures again with a final 4-measure section that has a break for Luques to get started on a solo. We'll just get into that second section with a sample. Let's come back at the end to hear the break into Luques' solo. Cardello takes over on the next section with the improvisations, and then Luques brings back the melody for the final section of the tune to wrap it up. Track 10, Where Do We Go Now? This is a pensive ballad that Cardello starts out with a rubato solo opening. Let's hear it get started. As bass and drums join in from there, it keeps the tentative feeling of wondering where to go with some hesitations carried on, and We're Cotton has some trilly and sliding bass lines that are pretty cool before the final section, and he adds some bowing to the final note of the tune. And the recording wraps up with a final Cardello original Music for the People. This one is a lot of fun. It starts with a ringing chord section around a pedal tone for 8 measures. Then there's a more modally 12-measure section. The main melody has a folksy cuteness to it, like the opening track, 16 measures and a 4-measure interlude. It repeats with answering phrases from We're Cotton and an extra measure on the interlude into 16 measures of the pre-melody section before it explodes into a 12-bar blues for improvisations. Let's hear it get started. Nice bass lines there. Let's come back in for one more sample with some rollicking blues. More fun to come, and We're Cotton gets a walking and snappy bass solo before they get back to a final melody section to wrap up the recording. An impressive first statement from an exciting young pianist and composer. Caelan Cardello has a sense of both the past and present of great jazz piano playing, and he shows a lot of versatility here. The program of one standard, a tune each from Cedar Walton and Harold Mayburn, and a balance of original compositions takes you through blues, ballads, and swinging fun. Cardello can display light and cleanly articulated lines, sensitive, slow ideas, and also generate a lot of percussive energy. It's all enthusiastic and fun to listen to. His trio partners are a good match, with distinctive bass from Jonathan Weir-Cotton and explosive power from Domo Branch to match Cardello's percussive excitement. I'm really looking forward to Chapter 2.
You know, I was really looking forward to hearing all the jazz this week, as we have a really good lineup, but this one was kind of like the sleeper, and it wound up being my favorite album of the week. So I really liked it a lot. It was highly uplifting. All three members of the trio provided highlights, too. Caelan Cardello has a solid swinging style. He's warm on the slower tracks, and I was really drawn to Domo Branch's hard grooves and an equally hard hitting of the drums as he played. There was ferocious soloing on track 3, Steppin' Up, and on track 8, Groundwork by both Cardello and Domo Branch. They live up to the track's titles in a big way. I also thought the sexy strolling rhythm of Solidarity, coupled with the Latin-sounding middle 8 on that track, was really cool. Then a really nice kind of juxtaposition of ideas, unexpected. And guest saxophonist Chris Luques bringing some character to his part as well. Jonathan Weir-Cotton's personality also comes through strongly on the bass. This is an album full of personality and good vibes, and one for the playlist. I think this is going to be accompanying me all autumn long.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to have an exciting future. I should mention, I also enjoyed Chris Lewis's sax. It's nice to have another instrument there, a wind instrument, to sort of give some variety on the recording. And I think Cardello needs a really explosive drummer because his left hand is really hard hitting. So someone's got to match that energy.
Well, he certainly got that on this album.
All right. In our next recording, as the jazz world knows, we lost the great Eddie Palmieri a few weeks back. And then I saw this album was coming out. And it was interesting in a number of ways because it features Eddie Palmieri, but it's also a combination that we wouldn't expect. And this is by trombonist Conrad Herwig, Reflections Facing South on Savant. This came out on August 29th. And it features Eddie Palmieri on piano and Luques Curtis on bass, a bass player we've heard before with Diego Rivera, Jonathan Powell, and others. Now, there was some question as to when this recording was made. We were trying to figure it out.
We were talking about this.
Because we know that Eddie Palmieri became ill, I think, around 2024, and he had to cancel some live performance schedules. And it was a little bit hard to find, but I was able to find the Savant booklet online. It's not always easy to find information on their recordings. But this turns out to have been made in the summer of 2020. Conrad Herwig often played with Eddie Palmieri going back to 1986. The album notes say their connection deepened several years later when, after assuming the position of chair of jazz studies at Rutgers University, Herwig retained Palmieri's services as a sort of permanent artist in residence, precipitating frequent Herwig-Palmieri duo performances for their students. By August 2020, Herwig estimates we've played duo probably 100 times in various venues. So they had collaborated as a duo a lot, even though we're used to hearing them both with a lot of Latin percussion, and we think of that big Latin sound. So add in Luques Curtis's bass, and things are going to be really interesting on this recording. We're going to hear a different side of these players. This was recorded and mixed by Chris Sulte, recorded at Trading 8's recording studio, Paramus, New Jersey, on August 26th and 27th, 2020, mastered by Dave Darlington at Bass Hit Studio in New York. So we're going to get a mix of compositions from both players and some old favorites and some new material here. The recording is going to start out with a Palmieri tune, Bianco's Waltz. This tune is a retitling of a tune called Verdict on Judge Street, going back to 1969. The referent, the notes explain, is Bob Bianco, a guitarist, composer, saloon singer, and Frank Sinatra impersonator. Curtis and Palmieri get the rhythmic machine going for this waltz on the 16-measure intro. Herwig takes the melody that has an A-B-A-B form, with the A section having a repeated 8-measure phrase. Interestingly, the first B section is shorter at just 14 measures. Let's hear things get started on this recording. Herwig continues on after the melody for a solo with great tone and fun agility. On this one, let's check out Curtis's solo that follows Herwig. Neat melodic ideas and rhythmic dexterity, and once more through the melody finishes it up. Track 2, another Palmieri tune, Come On Mi Guajira, the Cuban dance form here. This is fun and playful. After an 8-measure intro, Herwig's 16-measure minor melody slides the pitches down with some other falling glisses, and Palmieri is up first for some fun. And let's just keep going, listening to the rhythmic interaction of Palmieri and Curtis on this one. You can hear Palmieri's vocalizations in there too.
You certainly can. I was picking that up all the way through.
Curtis gets some improvisations next, and Herwig adds in backing notes and then gets his own solo. The ending sounds especially spontaneous, as most of them do here. Track 3, this one's credited to Palmieri and Herwig, Que Viva Barry, Long Live Barry. Herwig first recorded this tune dedicated to salsa trombonist Barry Rogers on a 2-trombone recording with Steve Davis in 2007. A cool bass line and rhythmic piano chords make a nice groove on the intro. The melody is in an AA-BAA shape with tricky lines on the B section that Herwig handles with flair. Curtis is up first for a bass solo. On this one, let's check out Herwig's trombone solo. Let you hear the ending of that because it's a lot of fun there. Palmieri works up the tension in his solo with lots of dissonance and tremolos, and Herwig picks up the melody from the B section, and they all add some spontaneous ideas to the ending. Track 4, Reflections Facing South by Conrad Herwig. This is the title track that he composed some years back while staying in Argentina. The trombone melody has a longing quality about it with returning phrases. Palmieri's backing is really fun to listen to here. The whole melody's 36 measures, and Herwig continues on improvising. Really great chops and endurance. Let's check out Palmieri's solo on this one. It's really rhythmically playful. He's getting things there reset for Herwig to come in on the last 12 measures of the melody section into some improvisations to end it. Track 5 is a Palmieri tune, Listen Lady, and the notes say this represents Herwig's response when the band's chaperone in Mexico City, who was a very nice person, took their passports at the airport to check them in and then misplaced them. She was in tears, it says, And he recalls I said, "Listen, lady, go back and find our passports." The notes describe it having a free kind of avant-garde intro where we work our way into another jazz waltz. Let's check that out. And let's hear Palmieri get the waltz going after that intro section is finished. Herwig has an adventurous solo on this one, and Palmieri and Curtis trade off sections of ideas before Herwig is back with the melody, but they keep it going with more improvisations from Curtis and Herwig, stretching it to 8 minutes. It's the longest tune on the recording. Track 6 is credited to both Palmieri and Herwig, Augmented Blues. This is Herwig's tune The 11th Hour, which he recorded in 2001 on an album with Bill Charlap, James Genus, and Gene Jackson, transposed from B-flat into C and reconfigured by Palmieri. And the notes say that over the years they jammed on the blues all the time, and sometimes Eddie would play augmented seventh chord substitutions. Herwig says it was spontaneous and it fit perfectly. The interesting harmony and combination with infectious rhythms makes this one really irresistible. After a 4-measure intro, Herwig takes it around the 12-bar blues melody just once before bursting into improvisations. Really exciting. And let's check out some of Palmieri's fun teasing solo on this one. Herwig will join in for some punctuation with Palmieri's chords, and Curtis gets a solo too before Herwig is back with the final blues melody. Track 7 is a Palmieri tune, Cuando se habla de amor. When speaking of love, it's a bolero. The album notes refer to the vocal quality of Herwig's trombone, and he really does sing the melody here. After a short intro, the melody is kind of long at 40 measures, but it has a repeating A section that also comes at the end. Palmieri starts his solo sparsely and lightly on this one, getting more rhythmic as he goes along, and then resetting for another round. Herwig has a really animated solo and comes back to the melody on the B section. Now, the endings for most of the tunes have been spontaneous throughout. Herwig has some fun acrobatics here, so let's hear the last A section of the melody into the ending. Track 8, also by Eddie Palmieri, Monica, dedicated to the wife of Venezuelan producer Frank Abenante. This is rubato and dreamy from the bass and piano intro through Herwig's floating melody lines. Let's hear some of it. Herwig will go on and on with improvisations on this one. I'll jump in a little bit after 3 minutes where Palmieri and Curtis give things a new rhythmic push, and then Palmieri takes over. The recording ends up with track 9, El Guerrero Solitario, a Conrad Herwig tune, The Lone Warrior. There's a 12-measure alternating chord intro with a hypnotic ostinato. The longing minor melody is perfect for Herwig's tone. It's 32 measures AABA form, brightening a bit to major on the B section. Let's hear it get going into that B section. Sunshine peeking through there. Curtis is up for the first solo after the melody, so let's hear one more from him as our final sample. Herwig and Palmieri get solos too, and the ending has some final floating lines from Herwig after the melody. We're used to hearing Latin music, and especially Conrad Herwig and Eddie Palmieri backed by propulsive percussion, so this recording is a real change of environment. The Latin rhythms are still here, but there's more space and free flow for relaxed exploration, and it comes natural to them having played as a duo over the years before this recording. The overall mood is of a meeting of old friends who love and trust each other, and that produces a lot of spontaneity. Old favorites of these two in compositions and new material combine in the program, and Herwig and Palmieri's improvisations are playful and reaching. Luques Curtis's bass playing makes fine grooves and flows and dances with Palmieri's rhythmic backing, and his technique and improvised ideas on his solos are impressive. It's sad to say goodbye to Eddie Palmieri, but with this recording, you feel like you were let in to share a special time of music making with his friends.
This really is an amazing display of spontaneous sounding performances by veteran musicians who have drunk deep from the Latin music well in their careers. Palmieri adds a lot of character to the recording and sounds spontaneous throughout. He's such the real thing on the piano, providing solid rhythm throughout and solid vocalizing too. You realize what we've lost when you hear him. Now, the vocalizing can be distracting, but it's what he did, and he doesn't have the percussion under him to cover that up. Now that he's gone, though, it kind of comes across as charming. Yeah. It did drive me a little crazy, though, but just because it's him and he's not here, I really rather enjoyed hearing it, too. The playing all around is so great that you just sort of put it out of mind. Or maybe you're charmed by it. Add to that Palmieri, without any percussion on the album, sets the rhythm himself on the piano, and you realize what a consummate musician he was. He'll even change rhythmic patterns within his solos, keeping the tempo, yet creating an entirely spontaneous new feel. Herwig himself is agile on the trombone, heard by me here for the first time without a large orchestra backing him, and he sounds a bit vulnerable at times, but always rhythmically solid. Luques Curtis keeps the bass lines moving and solos busily when he gets the chance. This is a great reminder of what we lost when Eddie Palmieri passed away.
Yeah, and supposedly there's a duo project with Curtis and Palmieri that's recorded and will be coming out in the future too, so.
Well, I'll have to keep an ear out for that too.
Be even more of an intimate setting. All right, we'll stay on the Latin theme for our final recording with alto saxophonist Miguel Zenón. His quartet here, Vanguardia Subterránea, live at the Village Vanguard. It's on his own music label, Miel Music. Came out August 29th as well. Originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico, Zenón made his way to Berklee College of Music. After graduating from Berklee in 1996, he attended the Manhattan School of Music, where he received a master's degree in performance in 2001 before settling into New York City. He's a MacArthur laureate, a Guggenheim fellow, and a Doris Duke artist. Back in episode 78, New World Rhythms from August of 2022, we heard Música de las Américas, also on his own label. He also released The Art of the Bolero Volume 2 in 2023, a duo album with Luis Perdomo, who we'll hear here, and Golden City last year with a different lineup of musicians, and he won a Grammy Award for that one. And this is his quartet again on this recording that was on the recording that we had previously discussed, and this is their first live recording, and Zenón's 18th as a leader. The quartet has played week-long residencies at the Village Vanguard 5 times, and they'll be back there to celebrate the release of this recording from September 16th to the 21st. So if you're in New York, go down and see this music live. So on this recording, on the alto saxophone, Miguel Zenón, on bass, Hans Glavischnig, on drums, Henry Cole, on piano, Luis Perdomo, who we've heard with Brian Lynch and Tom Harrell on recordings before, produced by Miguel Zenón. And most of the compositions are his originals. I'll point out the ones that come from other places. This was recorded September 20th and 21st, 2024 at the Village Vanguard by Tyler McDermott, mixed by Tyler McDermott as well, and mastered by Mark Wilder. The recording is going to get underway with a tune called Abre Cuto Wiri Mambo. And the notes say, in Bozal, or first-generation African Spanish, this means open up your ear and hear the mambo. And this one is all about the rhythm. In the notes, Zenón says, we are like another drum. And it starts out with a repeated riff phrase that Zenón introduces and the others join in on and soon returns after a rhythmic chordal section. Let's hear this recording get going. After a pause, a more moving harmonic section will launch Zenón into improvisations, so let's jump back in from there. Miguel Zenón is always exciting to listen to, but you can pick up on some extra intensity in this recording from the live environment and inspiration from being in this classic venue. Perdomo follows with a piano solo full of forward motion, and Cole gets to build up a lot of drum energy over a vamping section, and Zenón brings back the opening riff over that vamping rhythm to the end. It's an exciting start, and the crowd approves. Track 2, El Día de mi Suerte, My Lucky Day. This is a tune by Willie Colon and Hector Perez from 1973. The notes tell about Zenón's inspiration from listening to New York salsa when he was growing up in Puerto Rico and how this music got into his DNA. If you know the original, it begins with blasting trombone intervals from Willie Colon, but here it's transformed into something more meditative with Glavishnik getting it going with soft bass intervals for Zenón to bring in phrases over. The phrases come to pauses before gathering more momentum. The bass and rhythm section as a whole have an undulating beat going on, and Zenón is contrastingly fluid and lyrical in his improvisations, gradually getting more rhythmic and choppy to high cries. He returns to the melody with a more seductive dance rhythm for a section, and then Perdomo is up for a piano solo, so let's hear some of his playing on this tune. After the piano solo, the next section is riffy rhythmic fun with lots of fills from Cole, and then it gets quiet to a soft ending. Track 3 is Vita, and the notes say this originated as a private song written in 2010 with the title Segunda Madre as a birthday present for Zenón's grandmother, and he expanded it into a full composition for the quartet with a chacarera-style rhythm supporting the tender melody. The opening is sensitive and rubato, Zenón working with Perdomo into bass and drums, bringing in a steady rhythm. I'll jump in a bit further on so we can hear some of the melody a little bit after a minute in. Glavishnik has a long melodic bass improvisation on this one, and I was thinking of sampling that, but Zenon's improvisations here are really spirited and uplifting, showing off dexterity and boppy phrasing, so I decided we'll go for that solo. Great playing. After his solo, there's a little unison transition section in the bass and piano into a final sax melody ending. Track 4, another Zenón composition, Dale la vuelta, meaning turn it around. Now the notes say that in this composition, the same space is subdivided in two different zones, 7 and 8, switching back and forth to create a unique rhythmic identity. Are you ready for that? Perdomo starts it out placidly, joined by Zenón. Glavishnik introduces the underlying bass pattern, and then your head can start to spin with the piano and sax pyrotechnics placed on top. Sounds pretty tricky. Zenón's solo is rhythmic and intense over the popping beat on this one. Let's hear some of Perdomo's playing on this tune. And the original sections come back to a short coda ending. Track 5 is Coordenadas. Now the Bandcamp notes explain the genesis of this composition. The quartet's experiences playing at the village Vanguard form the conceptual basis of Coordenadas, To create the main theme, Zenón looked up the geographical coordinates for the village Vanguard and the birthplaces of each band member: Santurce for Zenón, Mayagüez in Puerto Rico for Cole, Caracas, Venezuela for Perdomo, and Graz, Austria for Glavishnik. He encoded the numbers into pitches, massaged the result until it sounded like the music he wanted, and turned the band loose on it. The result, the four musicians play their origins at this famous location, and when they solo, they're each at home. Got that? Let's hear what it sounds like. Perdomo has the first solo on this one, and Zenón is back with a transition into a solo and once more through the coordinates. I'll leave you to check out the solos on your own on this one. Track 6 is Vanguardia Subterránea. For the title track here, Zenón crafted what he calls a melodic poem inspired by the history of the club, the notes say. To transform that into a composition for the quartet, he added a continuous groove, something that has a straight-up clear pulse, and then we added something else that's floating against the groove, rhythmically disconnected at first and locked in eventually. That's Zenón's quote explaining this here. I think you'll get the idea on this one. Cole gets that soft and steady groove going, and Perdomo and Zenón have the floating phrases on top. In the next section that we'll just get to in this sample, Glavishnik joins in as well on bowed bass. And there's the bowed bass coming in. Now let's jump back in where all of this gets locked in together. It's a joyful sound, and they keep the riffy groove going, Perdomo and Zenón working in sections of improvised ideas to a big climax and a lot of applause. They include a short section of the flowing original idea to a rhythmic final phrase to end it. It's a unique idea for a tune. Track 7, Benedicion, Blessing. This is for Zenón's mother. Glavishnik sets the rhythm with a gently bouncing bass figure on the intro. The sax melody is gentle and flowing when it comes in. Zenón's solo on this one is uplifting and searching. Let's hear how he wraps it up. Perdomo has a solo with connected ideas of rippling lines into chiming chords, coming down in intensity for a final sax melody section. And the recording finishes up with a tune called Perdóname, Forgive Me, a reworking of a tune by Jorge Luis Piloto, who had a hit with it in 1990. This version is a tribute to the singer who made it famous, superstar singer Gilberto Santa Rosa, a soneros, or improvising singer in Puerto Rican salsa tradition. His recording was made live at Carnegie Hall in 1995, so I checked that out first, and the vocals are great, with full-on orchestration, strings, brass, and underneath everything, a pulsing electric bass. And once you hear that, it seems like something that would take a lot of reimagination to distill into a jazz quartet, but the results are interesting. The opening section has Glavishnik working in with bowed bass and then setting up an infectious rhythm joined by Perdomo for Zenón's vocal-like melody. Let's check it out. Perdomo has a piano solo first, working through complex rhythmic ideas, and Zenón follows, playing on, connecting to a final melody section that suddenly pairs back to just piano and sax before building up with infectious salsa rhythmic intensity to the ending. Let's check out that ending to this tune and the recording. And the crowd goes wild. It's an interesting program with cerebral compositions like Coordenadas and Vanguardia Subterránea, balanced out by more tender dedications to Zenón's mother and grandmother, and jazz adaptations of famous salsa tunes. Latin rhythms are always in evidence, but this rhythm section can be free-flowing as well, and Zenón's solos cover ground from bop-influenced phrasing and more biting rhythmic inflection. Through all the playing, spontaneity and excitement come through, with standout solos from Zenón and Perdomo. Klavishnik has well-developed bass solos and is essential for developing bass lines that carry the tunes along, even using the bow a bit here and there. Henry Cole sounds comfortable in any rhythmic landscape and can be subtle or dynamic. The sound quality on this recording is similar to other Village Vanguard recordings that I have. It's well-balanced and clear, but with a bit of live distance that's noticeable. No worry there, the live energy comes through, and there's a lot musically here for you to unpack while you enjoy repeated listening, and maybe go down and see this group soon if you're in New York.
Yeah, that would be a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Huh? This is a rhythmically infectious, highly entertaining program. It's a lively night out, so it kind of made me want to go too. For me, the contrast between Zenón and pianist Luis Perdomo's playing was the focal point. Perdomo plays with warm overall tone on the piano. You feel like he has the overall shape of the solo in mind when he starts. They're usually very satisfying aesthetically. I especially like the piano solo in track 7, Benedicion, for this reason. Meanwhile, Zenón isn't a warm tone player at all, though he does get warm in the middle register at times. He's really very adventurous and sort of aggressive in his playing. And he goes up for high notes often on a relatively high-toned instrument. They're complete opposites as musicians, and that kind of tension, it brings some tension to the music, which was really enjoyable. Henry Cole shines on drums throughout the album, but I especially liked him in Dale la Vuelta. He hits hard throughout the album and sets some great grooves. Overall, this is a pretty exciting performance from what must have been an electrifying night at the Village Vanguard. And yeah, I'd encourage people to go too. I'd go if I were in New York. Yeah.
All right, and that's going to wrap things up for episode 227 of Adult Music. And we're going to take a week off next week, Mike.
Yes, we are. It's kind of a much-needed week off, even though work is now getting in the way again. But yeah, it's probably a good thing.
I can use some time for normal listening without taking intensive notes.
Yeah, because the thing is, the desire for normal listening sort of builds up as you do this week to week. Like, I want to hear this, but I have to listen to this.
Plus, every time we record one of these, it takes a complete day of post-production for me to put this all together, listening to us all over again. And I can use a week away from that.
So, sorry, listeners, if you're really going to insist that we do this every week, start donating. We'll do it then. We promise.
We need some interns and a production assistant.
Right.
Anyway, we've got a lineup for that next episode, which should be released on September 22nd. And what's on the classical side, Mike?
Yeah, I've got 3 that I'm kind of been looking forward to all year. First one is Andre Campra, who is a composer from the Baroque era, his Messa de Requiem and Miserere. Now, we didn't talk about this on the podcast, but Harmonia Mundi released a really great recording of Campra's Requiem last year. And this is a recording on the Pentatone label by Les Arts Florissants, conducted by William Christie. And I'd like to hear this one too, so we're going to get to hear that. And it's coupled with another big work by him, which I haven't heard, so that'll be interesting. One of our favorite composers, Carl Nielsen, Symphony No. 5. Now, this is from the conductor Edward Gardner on the Chandos label. And we heard Symphonies 4 and 3, I believe, on this podcast. This is the next in that series. They're all SACD. They just sound great. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. Also has his clarinet concerto on the wonderful Helios Overture, which is a work that needs to be heard more. It's really beautiful. And the most famous contemporary composer in the world, him and John Williams both, Arvo Pärt. He's celebrating his 90th birthday this week, September 11th. So he'll be 90 years old. We're going to talk about a new album of his music called And I Heard a Voice. This is performed by Vox Clementis, and it's on the ECM New Series label. And looking forward to it. I haven't heard any new Arvo Pärt releases for a while, so that should be good.
Those all sound really intriguing. I'm really excited to hear some more Nielsen, as always.
I always am, myself, yeah.
All right, on the jazz side, this one I've been listening to since it came out Friday because I got my Luxman amp back.
Yeah, congratulations.
From repair. This was the first thing that I played when I got everything. And it's an unexpected combination of 2 players that we really like. Guitarist Paul Bolenbach from Joey DeFrancesco's original organ trio. And we've heard him do a lot of interesting things recently. A lot of nice acoustic guitar work, which you'll hear on here, as well with bassist Boris Kozlov. And that's it, just the 2 of them. It's called Synergy on Steeplechase. And yeah, there's really a lot of great musical interaction here. That's fresh out this Friday, September 5th. Then we're going to go over to Italy on Irma Records for some vibes. Vibraphonist Giovanni Perin, Meet Me. And this also has saxophonist we like, Michele Polga, on a few tracks. So that's fresh out on Friday too. And then we'll go over for one more from Brian Lynch's label, The Holistic Music Works, and he plays on this album as well, but it's trombonist Jason Forsyth with a recording called It's About Time. So we'll get some trombone and some exciting Latin rhythms on there too, I think. All these records, classical and jazz, will be up on our Deezer playlist. You'll have an extra week to listen to them along with us before the next episode, and I'll have a link to it, the playlist, up on our Facebook page as well. Any final words, Mike?
Oh, I think I'm just going to sleep for a week and then pick up these new recordings and just start fresh.
Doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Yeah.
As always, we want to thank Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks with episode 228. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.